Hello everyone, this is the Fifth Nuptial Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and I'm out of breath. Here with my wife, Reverend Diane Paul. Oh, just taking off. And tonight we're going to study paper 67, the Planetary Rebellion. Very important paper. And that is on page 754.1 on the original book, and it's paper 6701 and all the rest. Let's say a quick prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for blessing us with this wonderful opportunity to share with others this wonderful revelation. That you be with us tonight and open our hearts and minds that we might remember some of this and share it with others. And we'll be able to explain what happened, how we got in the situation we're in right now, the rebellion. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share this and to serve you and serve mankind. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son's name, Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. Okay, paper 67, the Planetary Rebellion. And
I'm back. Have we started?
no, we're just ready. Matter of fact, why don't you start us out tonight, Will? Paper 67, the Planetary Rebellion.
Paper 67, the Planetary Rebellion. The problems associated with human existence on Urantia are impossible of understanding without the knowledge of certain great epochs of the past, notably the occurrence and consequences of the Planetary Rebellion. Although this upheaval did not seriously interfere with the progress of organic evolution, it did remarkably modify the course of social evolution and of spiritual development. The entire superphysical history of the planet was profoundly influenced by this devastating calamity.
Probably the one thing in our past history that's affected this planet the most is this rebellion, the planetary rebellion, Calicasta's rebellion against God the Father. And it affected us and everyone that came after that on through probably eons. And that's what we're talking about, this certain epic of the past. And it's very important for us to understand that we are involved in this rebellion, and it's still going on until everyone has been adjudicated, until all those that rebelled has been judged by the Ancients of Days. They also tell us here that it did not really interfere with the organic evolution. In other words, we've evolved right on course, like any experimental planet does evolve. And so our normal evolution did take place, but this did affect all of our social and all of our economic and all things that affect us socially and spiritually since that period of time. All right, let's go on. Tim, why don't you take the next one tonight?
Section 1, the Caligastia Betray. For 300,000 years, Caligastia had been in charge of Urantia when Satan Lucifer, Lucifer's assistant, made one of his periodic inspection calls. And when Satan arrived on the planet, his appearance in no way resembled your caricatures of his nefarious majesty. He was and still is a Melnonitic son of great brilliance. And no marvel, for Satan himself is a brilliant creature of light.
Okay, so these pictures of Satan and Lucifer with horns and stuff like that is poppycock, right? They don't look up here like that at all. They were Lenanonic sons, and they were very brilliant and bright and that sort of thing. And it's telling us here for 300,000 years before this, Caligastus served in his normal position like he's supposed to. So the first 300,000 years, everything went fine. And of course, the Caligastus 100 were with him during that 300,000 years. It's hard for us to imagine 300,000 years since our lifetime is so small. But to them, that's a small amount of time. This is an illustration of Jerusalem, Satan, and Caligasta, and it gives reference to them being Satan being the system, the associate to the system sovereign, and Calabastia being the planetary prince. So, that way.
You must have a tremendous alliance, for someone that you work with like that.
Oh, yeah,
300,000
years.
years.
Boy,
I
get to
mean,
know somebody, don't you?
yeah.
Yeah. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
In the course of this inspection, Satan informed Caligastia of Lucifer's then proposed Declaration of Liberty. And as we now know, the prince agreed to liberty to betray the plan on the announcement of the rebellion. The loyal universe personalities looked with peculiar disdain upon Prince Caligastia because of this premeditated betrayal of trust. The Creator's Son voiced this contempt when he said, "You are like your leader, Lucifer, and you have simply perpetuated his iniquity. He was a falsifier from the beginning of his self-exaltation because he abode not in the truth."
That should all be in red, because that's Michael or Jesus talking here, right? Okay, and they're telling us that the loyal beings of the universe look at Caligastia with this disdain, because he thought about this ahead of time. This was not like an immediate thing. So this was a pre-planned rebellion and a pre-planned betrayal of the trust he had been given in this planet. So that's what they're talking about here. And then the Creator's Son, Michael, goes on to say, like Lucifer, you perpetuated this iniquity. In other words, it's not just sin. When you fall into sin, that's rebellion against God. But when you go on with this sin over and over and over and stick with it, that turns into iniquity, and that's what Michael's talking about.
I had a question, Roger.
Yeah, let me finish this thought before you ask it. He also says that he was a falsifier from the beginning. In other words, from the beginning of his time of self-exaltation and abode not in truth. So Lucifer is what they're talking about there. Go ahead, Tim.
Doesn't it say in the Bible too that Lucifer is also referred to the bright morning star?
Yes, but that's incorrect. The bright and morning star
Is Gabriel, right? And you think
Gabriel.
Gabriel would take offense to that?
Yes, he would, because the bright and morning star, there's only one bright and morning star, and that's Gabriel.
That's
right?
correct.
There's
So that's why I was asking, like, why did he take over that name?
Yeah.
I mean, if they refer Lucifer to,
Yeah, that's not only a misquote, that's totally wrong. So
that's correct.
yeah,
I'm sure Gabriel forgives the people who wrote the Bible.
I'm sure he does.
There are many mistakes.
Well
Yeah,
said, man.
they had limited information and knowledge to work from.
Really, that's better said, forgive the people that wrote the books that are in the Bible.
That's right. That's right. All right, Diane.
In all the administrative work of a local universe, no high trust is deemed more sacred than that reposed in a planetary prince who assumes responsibility for the welfare and guidance of the evolving mortals on a newly inhabited world. And of all forms of evil, none are more destructive of personality status than betrayal of trust and disloyalty to one's confiding friends. In committing this deliberate sin, Caligastia so completely distorted his personality that his mind has never since been able fully to regain its equilibrium.
So as far as they're concerned, he's cosmically insane
Yeah.
to do this, and I'd have to agree, right?
Well, so's Hitler.
Yeah, he was cosmically insane too. Yeah.
I'm sure others too, but.
Oh, there's been many that's come down the
Yeah.
pipe through the years. There are many ways of looking at sin, but from the universal philosophic viewpoint, sin is the attitude of a personality who is knowingly resisting cosmic reality. In other words, they don't think that this is real. Error might be regarded as a misconception or distortion of reality. Evil is a partial realization of or maladjustment to universe realities. But sin is a purposeful resistance to divine reality, a conscious choosing to oppose spiritual progress, while iniquity consists in an open and persistent defiance of recognized reality and signifies such a degree of personality disintegration as the border on cosmic insanity. There it is, right there. So when you fall into sin and you keep down that sinful path and you rebel against God, then in a short time it turns into iniquity. Okay? And iniquity leads to cosmic insanity because you lose the ability to determine what is real and what is not real. Right? Tim, would you take the next one?
Error suggests lack of intellectual keenness, evil deficiency of wisdom, sin abject spiritual poverty, but inequity is indicative of vanishing personality control.
So you're losing control of your own personality when you get to that point. Right? Rodney,
Millie.
did we skip Millie?
Millie. Yeah, we need Millie.
I skipped over
Okay.
it. Millie, you want to take the next one?
When sin has so many times been chosen and so often been repeated, it may become habitual. Habitual sinners can easily become iniquitous, become wholehearted rebels against the universe and all of its divine realities. While all manner of sins may be forgiven, we doubt whether the established iniquitor would ever sincerely experience sorrow for his misdeeds or accept forgiveness for his sins.
Okay, so I want y'all to notice something here. When they talk about this, they're not only talking about the fact that these beings rebelled against God, right? They're also talking about that these beings rebelled against universe reality. They rebelled against the whole universe and their place in the universe, right? So when you rebel against God, because God controls everything, you rebel against the universe in essence in itself. So you're rebelling against that which makes you who you are. So that's what eventually leads to the cosmic insanity. And they wouldn't accept forgiveness because they get so wrapped up in this fantasy that they're in. Right? All right. I sometimes used to say that this is probably why there's no tears in heaven. Because these beings that rebel, nobody wants them around because they're not real. Okay. All right, let's go on. Rodney, would you take the next one since we went out of order there?
Sure.
Okay.
To the outbreak of rebellion. Shortly after Satan's inspection, and when the planetary administration was on the eve of the realization of great things for Urantia, one day, midwinter of the northern continents, Caligastia held a prolonged conference with his associate, Caligastia, after which the latter called the 10 councils of Urantia in session extraordinary. This assembly was opened with a statement that Prince Caligastia was about to proclaim himself absolute sovereign of Urantia and demanded that all administrative groups abdicate by resigning all of their functions and powers into the hands of Caligastia as trustee, pending the organization of the planetary government and the subsequent redistribution of these offices of administrative authority.
So basically, what Caligastia is saying is, I'm assuming complete sovereignty of the planet as of right now. And I'm putting Caligastia in charge of all 10 of the councils, that we talked about last week, right? So in essence, they're saying, we're taking over. That's basically it. And the new redistribution of offices of administrative authority, what they were going to do is put people in these offices that agreed with them. That's all there is to it.
That's what the president does. I mean, as soon as
Yeah.
he's elected or she's elected. you
Yeah,
know,
they put in the people they want there, right? New administration, it's the same principle. Okay? And this is a slide.
Did he do this to other planets in the system?
No, just this planet, Millie. Now, their planetary princes, we don't have record of this, but you know the other 39 planets that followed us into rebellion with Lucifer, they did probably exactly the same thing. Probably a percentage of their midwayers, a percentage of their 100 went one way and a percentage went the other. But they were cut off from the circuits just exactly like we are. So when the 39 planets got cut off from the circuits, all 39 were cut off, and they're still cut off as far as I know.
Thank you.
Okay, now this is a breakdown, and I've got a couple slides. One thing I want to point out on this one is this slide right here, the Calabasas 100 organization. That's a link to a website, and I may try to hit it and see if we can get it to come up real quick. But this is basically the primary, secondary, and total midwayers. You see this here? Primary, there's 50,000. Secondary was 1,984. Total 51,984, right? The disloyalty, the ones that went into rebellion, the primary was 40,119. The secondary was 873, and total was 40,992, right? So that left the loyal ones to Michael's 9,881 primary midwayers were loyal. 1,111 secondary midwayers were loyal. That gave a grand total of 10,992 midwayers that are loyal to the planet. And those are the same midwayers that are serving us now, with the exception of a couple that were taken, that went back. Okay. But let me show you. There's a link over here, the Master of the Universe org. That will take you to the same type of chart. And this one right here, let me see if I can click on this and see if I can get it to come up, because it's pretty interesting. Because it breaks it down. That's not going to come up on mine. Let me see if I can get it to come up on this one. It should. I should bring up the link. That's not it. You can read that link at yourself at your leisure. That's the link I was trying to get to. That right there, this HTTP-masteruniverse.org. You can follow that link, and it breaks down. Well, it came up on this one. It didn't come up on this one. Maybe it's still thinking about it. Let me see here. There we go. There's the chart I was looking for. Okay, this is a breakdown of all the different boards, the 10 boards that Calabasas tried to take over, and this is the one how they were all broke down and who was in charge of them, right? And it shows how many members in each one is 10. And there's two other columns here. One is Van. Van remained faithful to Michael. Okay? So all these under the column that says Van remained faithful, and all of them that says Calabasas rebelled. This is the banner of Michael up here, the 3 blue concentric circles. This is the banner of Lucifer, the black dot with 1 red circle. Okay? So this is how many rebelled compared to how many stayed loyal. All right? It tells you the leader of each one of these councils, but it also breaks down how the totals. And you can see here that 40 out of the 100 stayed loyal and 60 rebelled. It also tells us here what happened to them, okay, which is kind of interesting. Thus were 40 out of the 100 saved, later to be transferred to Jerusalem, where they resumed their paradise journey. This is paper 6741, which is what we're studying now. And then it says, we know not the fate of the 60 staffed rebels, their adjusters still tarry on Jerusalem. We know they've been taken away, but we don't know what happened to them. But they were separated from their adjuster, and so their adjusters are still in Jerusalem. They never returned to get them again. So apparently they were taken away in chains. That's what happened to them. I hit that twice. Okay, and that's the chart I want to say, and you can get to that by clicking on these links.
So basically, the patterns of the rebellion manifested probably many times throughout the history since the rebellion, but in particular with like Hitler, his whole policies and everything paralleled the Lucifer rebellion almost exactly, including the black dot and the red. And didn't he use something?
Yeah,
not just the swastika, but
well, the swastika was was a symbol of it was actually a religious symbol.
Right, it was, and so was obviously Caligastia represented his philosophy.
And the reason they started using that is that a couple of the Hitler's generals were very much into the occult, and that's why they used that symbol. It showed it was the basic symbol of the SS, and that's who was really in charge of most everything. Okay, I think you're right there.
Not all occult is bad, though. That was hideous what they did.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's some occult that's that's okay. The presentation of this astounding demand was followed by the mastery appeal of Van, chairman of the Supreme Council of Coordination. This distinguished administrator and able jurist branded the proposed course of Caligastia as an act of bordering on planetary rebellion, and appealed to his conferees to abstain from all participation until an appeal could be taken to Lucifer, the system sovereign of Satania. And he won the support of the entire staff. Accordingly, appeal was taken to Jerusalem, and forthwith came back the orders designating Caligastia as supreme sovereign on Urantia and commanding absolute and unquestioning allegiance to his mandates. And it was in reply to this amazing message that the noble Van made his memorable address of 7 hours' length, in which he formally drew his indictment of Caligastia, and Lucifer as standing in contempt of the sovereignty of the universe of Nebadon. And he appealed to the Most Highs of Adentia for support and confirmation.
Okay, so you see the situation. Van immediately understood that what Caligastia was trying to do was total rebellion against God. Okay, he understood this. So he appealed to Lucifer, not knowing that Lucifer was the instigator of the rebellion, right? And so Lucifer comes back and says, you just follow his orders, right? Because that's what he would do. He was in rebellion too. So Van was not satisfied with that. He knew that this was terribly wrong. So he immediately appeared to the Most Highs of Adentia. And this is the interesting thing. It's going to tell us what happens here, but this is what started this 7-year wait for Van for a reply from Adentia, because the system circuits were severed as soon as this rebellion went into effect. So he could not get a response from Adentia. Okay. Meantime, the system circuits have been severed, Urantia was isolated. Every group of celestial life on the planet found itself suddenly and without warning isolated, utterly cut off from all outside counsel and advice. What did that mean? That mean when the circuit was cut off, we were put in quarantine and they could not come and go any longer, right? So they were stranded on the planet, just like we were, okay? And it stayed that way for 7 years. All right. Millie.
They had no direction.
Huh?
No, they had no direction, no one to guide them.
No direction, no one to guide them. Even the Melchizedeks that were stationed here on the planet were not allowed to make themselves appear, right? That was against policy. So they could not even counsel them as to what to do. So Van took the initiative to file this appeal on his own and stuck with what he thought was the proper thing to do during the 7-year period. Okay?
He was the good guy.
He was the good guy along with Xenon, which was a human. Okay. Van was a superhuman. He was one of the Calabasas 100, right?
Yes.
Millie, would you take the next paragraph, please?
Caligastia formally proclaimed Caligastia, quote, God of Urantia, and supreme over all. Oh. With this proclamation before them, the issues were clearly drawn, and each group drew off by itself and began deliberations. Discussions destined eventually to determine the fate of every superhuman personality on the planet.
Now, do y'all believe that 60 out of the 100 followed this process and rebelled? Which is beyond my imagination. These are beings that went all the way through the mansion worlds, got all the way to Jerusalem, and still rebelled. You know, that's I just can't even comprehend that. All right. Tim, would you take the next one, please?
Delegastia formerly proclaimed Caligastia.
No, the next one, Tim. Seraphim and cherubim.
Oh, Seraphim and cherubim and other celestial beings were involved in the decisions of this bitter struggle, this long and sinful conflict. Many superhuman groups that chanced to be on Urantia at the time of its isolation were detained here, and, like the Seraphim and their associates, were compelled to choose, let me turn the page, between sin and righteousness, between the ways of Lucifer and the will of the unseen Father.
So all these superhuman, all these celestial beings that were on this planet were immediately detained until they made their decision, right? Whether to follow the rebellion or follow the will of the Father. Right? All right. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. For more than 7 years, this struggle continued. Not until every personality concerned had made a final decision. Word or did the authorities of Dintia interfere or intervene? Not until then did Van and his loyal associates receive vindication and release from their prolonged anxiety and intolerable suspense.
So they didn't know if they did the right thing or not, really, until 7 years later.
Through the 7 crucial years, the outbreak of rebellion on Jerusalem, the capital of Satania, was broadcast by the Melchizedek Council. The emergency Melchizedeks were immediately dispatched to Jerusalem, and Gabriel volunteered to act as a representative of the Creator's Son, whose authority had been challenged. With this broadcast of the fact of rebellion in Satania, the system was isolated, quarantined from her sister systems. There was war in heaven, the headquarters of Satania, and it spread to every planet in the local system.
Okay, so think about this. Not only our planet, but Jerusalem itself had rebellion on it, because that's where Lucifer was, right? So all these celestial beings, they were all contained within only our system. No one could leave until every single being had made their decision whether to follow Lucifer or the Father, one of the two. So every celestial being, every ascender, everybody in the system had to make that choice. On Urantia, 40 members of the corporeal staff of the 100, including Van, refused to join the insurrection. Many of the staff's human assistants, modified and otherwise, remember when the humans donated their blood plasma for the bodies for the Calagasta 100, they were changed and given a part of the circuit too. So that changed them also. That's what they're talking about, modified and otherwise. Were also brave and noble defenders of Michael and his universe government. And they've never seen Michael. They did this all on faith. There was a terrible loss of personalities among seraphim and cherubim. Almost one half of the administrator and transition seraphim assigned to the planet joined their leader in Dalagasta in support of the cause of Lucifer. 40,119 of the primary midwayers joined hands with Calagasta, but the remainder of these beings remained true to their trust. Well, that had to be something to have Van stay loyal when the majority of the beings went into the rebellion, right?
Hey, Roger,
Yeah,
I have a side note here
yeah.
between these two paragraphs, Revelation 7 and 8 from the Bible.
Okay, do you know what it says, Rod?
I don't,
You know?
I just thought that I would put that in there.
Oh, okay. All right. Really?
I can get that if you want.
Yeah, if you want to look it up, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and let you know.
What is it? Revelation what?
7 and 8,
Okay, chapter 7, verse 8.
it must be chapters 7 and 8.
The traitorous prince marshaled the disloyal midway creatures and other groups of rebellious personalities and organized them to execute his bidding, while Van assembled the loyal midway faithful groups and began the great battle for the salvation of the planetary staff and other marooned celestial personalities.
Now, when they're talking about this war going on, this is a spiritual war. This isn't a war of physical battle that we think of. This is far more deadly because we're talking about if these beings make the wrong decision, it could be a permanent annihilation of themselves. Right? Where in battle, if you get killed, you still wake up on the mansion worlds. Right? This is very serious.
And it looks like they would know that.
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you?
We're humans and we can figure that out.
Yeah. Tim, I think you're next.
During the times of this struggle, the Loyalists dwelt in an unwelled and poorly protected
Unwalled.
settlement.
Unwalled. Yeah. In other words, they don't have a wall around them. Okay.
Unwalled and poorly protected settlement a few miles to the east of Dalmatia. But their dwelling were guarded day and night by the alert and ever watchful loyal midway creatures, and they had possession of the priceless tree of life.
So they took the tree of life, left Dalmatia, and were a few miles east of them. But they were out with all the barbarians. They weren't protected like they were in Dalmatia with a 40-foot wall and all that, right? So they were very vulnerable. Rod, would you take the next one?
Yeah, it makes me wonder how they smuggled the tree of life out.
These are midway creatures, so they can manipulate matter. They probably just picked it up and carried it with them. You know?
I know how they got it out from the nose.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? We know it was in the center of the Father's temple, so, yeah.
But
Okay, upon the outbreak of the rebellion, loyal cherubim and servant, with the aid of 3 faithful midwayers, assumed the custody of the tree of life, independent only the 40 loyal practice of the staff and their associated modified mortals to partake of the fruit and needs of this energy plant. There were 56 of these modified andonite associates of the staff. 16 of the andonite attendants fought with this loyal staff, refusing to go into rebellion with their masters.
So there's more of the humans that did not rebel than there was of the celestial beings, which is kind of interesting. So when the people that they were working for rebelled, they refused to go into rebellion with them. So they, in essence, went with Van to this location. And we know that these Andonite associates, since they had the circuit of the system, as long as they ate the tree of life, they would go on living indefinitely, right? So probably this is where a lot of the old stories of people in the Bible living 900 and thousands of years, that's probably where this came from.
Hey, Roger, they mentioned the Andonites. That's the tribe, correct?
Yeah, that's the tribe. That's
And the descendants of who?
they're the descendants of Andon and Thonta.
That's correct. So this is happening on Urantia, the Earth.
Yeah, this is happening on your mansion. That's right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm up.
I
Right.
don't know, I think Miss
Did you
Millie.
just read?
No, Millie,
Well, you're up.
what about Millie?
No, Rodney just read.
Rodney just read, so you're up.
Oh, no, I'm after Lottie.
Yeah,
Who's Millie after?
after me.
Oh, okay. Throughout the 7 crucial years of the Caligastia Rebellion, Van was wholly devoted to the work of ministry to his loyal army of men, midwares and angels. The spiritual insight and moral steadfastness which enabled Van to maintain such an unshakable attitude of loyalty to the universe government was a product of clear thinking, wise reasoning, logical judgment, sincere motivation, unselfish purpose, intelligent loyalty, experiential memory, disciplined character, and the unquestioning dedication of his personality to the doing of the will of the Father in paradise.
And where did he learn all these? In the mention ones, right? Because he went to the mention ones.
They all did them.
Yeah, they all did. But he took the lessons to heart, right?
But you're saying that Van is not a human being, correct? He was.
No, Van was one of the Caligastia 100. He was a
100.
superhuman. Yeah.
So he was immortal one time on Urantia. I thought he was. I'll have to look this
No,
up.
he was not immortal on Urantia. He was probably immortal on a different planet.
That's correct. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, but he was immortal on a different planet. All right. All right. This 7 years of waiting was a time of heart searching and soul discipline. Such crisis in the affairs of the universe demonstrate the tremendous influence of mind as a factor of spiritual choosing. Education, training, and experience are factors in most of the vital decisions of all evolutionary moral creatures. But it is entirely possible for the indwelling spirit to make the direct contact with the decision-determining powers of the human personality so as to empower the fully consecrated will of the creature to perform amazing acts of loyal devotion to the will and the way of the Father in paradise. And this is just what occurred in the experience of Amadon, the modified human associate of man. He chose to follow the Father's will above all, right? And that's how he was able to forego all the sophistries of the rebellion, with Caligastia and the Midwayers and everybody trying to influence him, even though he was a human. Right?
Okay.
Millie.
Amadon is the outstanding human hero of the Lucifer Rebellion. This male descendant of Andon and Fanta was one of the 100 who contributed the life plasm to the prince's staff, and ever since that event, he has been attached to Van as his associate and human assistant. Amadon elected to stand with his chief throughout the long and trying struggle, and it was an inspiring sight to behold this child of the evolutionary races standing unmoved by the sophisticaries of Dalagastia, while throughout the 7-year struggle, he and his loyal associates resisted with unyielding fortitude all the deceptive teachings of the brilliant Caligastia.
That's what we need to do, right? We need to
Why did I stumble on sophistries? I couldn't say it.
Sophistries?
Sophistries, yes.
It's a mouthful, right?
I just didn't expect that word.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because these arguments that Dalagastia and Caligastia gave these people, we're talking about minds that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. So these guys are pretty sharp, you know, and to withstand all these influences, that's quite a feat if you think about it.
I was amazed when we talked about Van talking for 7 hours,
7
trying to
hours.
convince everybody to stay with us. You know,
Yeah.
come on, stay on this side.
That's pretty amazing.
You're talking for 7 hours?
Tim, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible that you have this primitive human being on Earth standing up to a very spiritual and high order of the universes,
Yeah,
being loyal.
it is.
It says Caligastia, with a maximum of intelligence and a vast experience in universe affairs, went astray, embraced sin. Amadon, with a minimum of intelligence and utterly devoid of universe experience, remained steadfast in the service of the universe and in loyalty to his associate Van. Utilized both mind and spirit in a magnificent and effective combination of intellectual determination and spiritual insight, thereby achieving an experiential level of personality, realization of the highest attainable order, mind and spirit. When fully united, are potential for the creation of superhuman values, even Morancha realities.
Isn't that amazing? You know, we're talking about Amadon here, being human and doing this, right, with no experience whatsoever. Amadon had not been through the mansion worlds yet, right? He was on this planet, came from this planet, and he's still stuck with it. Rodney.
There is no end to the recital of the stirring events of these tragic days. But at last, the final decision of the last personality was made. And then, but only then, that a Most High Evidentia arrived with the emergency Melchizedeks to seize authority on Urantia. The Caligastia panoramic reign records on Jerusalem were obliterated, and a probationary era of planetary rehabilitation was inaugurated.
So, y'all have to picture this. The Most Highs came to the planet with the Melchizedeks. Remember, there was a council of 12 Melchizedeks that came to take over the administration of the planet at the end of the 7 years of the Caligastia betrayal, right? And the Most Highs put the Melchizedeks in charge, right? And they seized all authority on Urantia. And then when they did that, they took the record of Caligastia and wiped it out. So Caligastia was no longer considered a planetary prince, right? Was not rated in the ranks of what? The Lananandek sons, right? He betrayed his own order. So basically they're saying everything you did in the past means nothing because of this act you've done right now, right? And this is the Most Highs that did this. And that's about the high as you can go, all right?
When you say the Most Highs,
Of Adentia, yes.
right, the Ranadek sons, but you're saying he did that to the Most Highs, correct?
Yeah, no, the Most Highs made the call to wipe out his record.
That's correct. Okay, thank you, Ron.
They are Verondadek sons, and Caligastia was a Lananandek son, the next one.
Yeah, because there's primary and secondary.
That's right, that's right. And when they did that, you would have to assume they did the same thing to Dalagastia, because he followed him, right? So that would be a logical assumption anyway. So,
For the Caligastia 100 after rebellion. When the final roll was called, the corporal members of the prince's staff were found to have aligned themselves as follows. Van and his entire court of coordination had remained loyal. Ang and 3 members of the Food Council had survived. The Board of Animal Husbandry were all swept into rebellion, as were all of the Animal Conquest advisors. Thad and 5 members of the educational faculty were saved. Nod and all of the Commission on Industry and Trade joined Caligastia. Hap and the entire College of Revealed Religion remained loyal with Van and his noble band. Lute and the whole Board of Health were lost. The Council of Art and Science remained loyal in its entirety, but Tut and the Commission on Tribal Government all went astray. Thus were 40 out of the 100 saved, later to be transferred to Jerusalem, where they resumed their paradise journey.
So the 40 that were saved, after this is all said and done, were taken back to Jerusalem to resume their duties, right?
So the remains of the midwayers that were excavated recently in West Virginia, wasn't it? They were actually the ones that were not loyal, and so they basically,
Yeah, they
we
were.
don't know whether they
It
repented.
weren't their remains, though. It was probably their
Grandchildren.
yeah,
Or their grandchildren.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was all happening on Urantia, correct?
yes, yeah.
What
We
what
watched a
is-
program the other night about the giants, where the giants come in. And we know that the land of Nod is where most of the giants came from, okay? And they named it Nod after Nod, the Commission on Industry, okay? And he was one of the rebellious, right? So him and the 60 ended up in this land, this area, and they call it the land of Nod. Basically, their descendants, their children and grandchildren, that sort of thing, passed down some of these giant tendencies, probably, because we know the midwayers were very tall, they estimate around 8 feet tall.
Like the midway?
I mean, not the midwayers, the Caligastia 100
Yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah.
misquoted, yeah.
were about 8 foot tall. So their descendants had been found all over the world, and they were talking about these Indian mounds in I think it's Virginia. There were
West Virginia, it was
West Virginia,
yeah.
like 13, 14 Indian mounds where they've excavated and found remains of these tall giants, and it's probably their descendants.
But they would have had the opportunity to have followed the Ascension Plan,
That's right.
to
That's
have
by
done the
that.
will of God.
And it's interesting, if you watch all these programs that speculate this and speculate that on our history, if you have the knowledge of the Urantia book, you know where these things came from.
Right.
It's no great jump of...
That's incredible, Roger, because it reminds me of how a woman saw something in her backyard and it was about 8 feet tall,
Uh-huh.
and that's where the whole Mothman story starts to begin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting how these things come about. Okay, now I'm lost again. Who's up?
I'm sorry, I just finished.
You just finished? Okay.
We're on the 60.
The 60 members of the Planetary staff who went into rebellion chose Nod as their leader. There you go, the land of Nod, right? They worked wholeheartedly for the rebel prince, but soon discovered that they were deprived of the sustenance of the system life circuits. What does that mean?
They were disconnected, yeah.
They were human. They were going to die, right? They awakened to the fact that they had been degraded to the status of mortal beings. They weren't superhuman. They were indeed superhuman, but at the same time material and mortal. In an effort to increase their numbers, Caligastia ordered immediate resort to sexual reproduction, knowing full well that the original 60 and their 40 modified Andinite associates were doomed to suffer extinction by death, sooner or later. After the fall of Dalmatia, the disloyal staff migrated to the north and the east, to the land of Nod, right? Their descendants were long known as the Nodites, and their dwelling place as what? The land of Nod, right? All right, and that's where all these legends of giants came from, right?
And when you said the system life circuits were referring to the tree of Adentia,
Yeah, the tree of life, yeah, the tree of Adentia, but the circuits itself. when you're encircuited in the system life circuits, you have the circuit going through your body itself, right? So you are part of the local universe on a higher level. And you can only be that way if you're what? You're above human, okay? Morancha or higher.
So as soon as they rebelled, they pretty much became human after
They
that?
became human. They were cut off.
And so they never thought of that before they,
No,
before they
without the
rebelled.
tree of life, they would die like every other being, right? Because it was the tree of life that reconstituted their cells to keep them from aging. Okay?
Right, so does it say anything about them dying on Earth, or?
Yeah, they all passed away on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they died like any other human.
I think they did live longer
Yeah, they
than
did.
humans,
Yeah,
but eventually, generation after generation, their lifespan was shortened.
yeah. That's
But
right.
they were still pretty tall people, right?
Yeah, they were pretty tall people, and that's probably where a lot of the legends of the giants and that sort of stuff, you know.
I'm surprised the NBA didn't call them.
And it's interesting, they mixed with a lot of the green race, so that's where you get this legend of the green giants, right?
I thought that
Jolly.
was vegetable
You
man.
know, no, that's really was not the vegetable. It was, you know, the Jolly Green Giant. Well, the legends came from the past, and the reason they came that way is because many of the Nodites mixed with the green race. And of course, we know the green race became extinct later, right? It was wiped out by the indigo race. So, okay, let's keep going.
Me.
Yeah.
The presence of these extraordinary supermen and superwomen, stranded by rebellion and presently mating with the sons and daughters of Earth, easily gave origin to those traditional stories of the gods coming down to mate with mortals, and thus originated the 1,001 legends of a mythical nature, but founded on the facts of the post-rebellion days, which later found a place in the folk tales and traditions of the various peoples whose ancestors had participated in these contracts with the Nodites and their descendants. Contacts
Contact.
with the Nodites and their
So
descendants.
that's how these myths develop, right? These stories are passed down generation to generation, and that's how it gets started. Tim, what do you think?
Sometimes a story is passed down and it's so unbelievable that people change it to something that can be believed.
That's right. That's right, they do.
And that's how they get changed. It really was true to begin with.
Yeah, I remember once in college we did this exercise. I don't remember what class it was about or something, where the instructor gave one person in the class a story, you know, and then they were to go out of the room and tell that same story to the next person. And he did this 10 times. And by the time they got to the 10th person, the story was nothing like what the original was, right? People
We used to do that as a party game. You whisper something to the person next to you, and they whisper it to the next person.
There you go.
That's
Totally
incredible, Roger.
unbelievable by the time you get to the end.
Yeah, it totally changes. All right.
It's funny you mention that.
Might be some of what happened in this book when the people who took the writing and typed it and then printed it and whatnot and said we didn't change anything, and everyone said, the original people said, yes, you did.
Yeah.
So maybe there were things that they just couldn't comprehend, and so they made it into something they could comprehend.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much that was changed, but there was change made. They did eventually admit.
It happens in everything. Every version of the Bible that's come out's been the same way too. You know, things have been tweaked here and there, and before you know it, it's totally different than the original story. You know.
It's like a party game. Who's
Yeah.
what?
Tim, I
Who's next? Tim.
think so.
The staff rebels, deprived of spiritual sustenance, eventually died a natural death, and much of the subsequent idolatry of the human races grew out of the desire to perpetuate the memory of these highly honored beings of the days of Caligastia. Well, that answers my question.
You see where idolatry comes from? They basically started worshiping these beings as higher beings, right? Because they were part of this prince's staff.
How did the adultery?
Huh?
Idolatry.
Oh, adultery, yeah.
Idolatry. Yeah,
It
it's
says idol-
worshiping idols, not sleeping around.
Right. I thought you said adultery.
No, no. It's worshiping the worshiping of idols. Yeah. Okay, Brian, I think you're.
Right.
When the staff of 100 came to Rancho, they were temporarily detached from their thought adjusters. Immediately upon the arrival of the Melchizedek receivers, the loyal personalities, except Van, were returned to Jerusalem and were reunited with their waiting adjusters. We know not the fate of the 60 staff rebels. Their adjusters still tarry in Jerusalem. Matters will undoubtedly rest as they now are until the entire Lucifer rebellion is finally adjudicated and the fate of all participants decreed.
So they're not allowed to resume their mission, their journey, unless they're found not guilty, right?
And then they would be reunited with their thought adjusters.
Then they would be reunited with their thought adjusters. But all of them are gone, right? The only one that stuck around was Van,
Now,
okay?
Van is still here, but he does not have a thought adjuster.
No, he didn't have a thought adjuster. He remained until Adam and Eve, and then shortly after Adam and Eve default, he left also.
Roger,
Yeah.
did any of the others remain? Or was it
No, just Van and Amadon. Amadon was his human assistant.
I know, but was it their decision?
Their decision to stay?
Yeah,
Yes, it was.
and the others, it was their decision
To
to
go.
leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Totally voluntary. Okay.
It was very difficult for such beings as angels and midwares to conceive of brilliant and trusted rulers like Caligastia and Delagastia going astray, committing traitorous sin. Those beings who fell into sin, they did not deliberately or premeditatively enter upon rebellion, were misled by their superiors, deceived by their trusted leaders. It was likewise easy to win the support of the primitive-minded evolutionary mortals.
So they did not realize at this time that they were going into rebellion against God himself, right? The vast majority of all human and superhuman beings who were victims of Lucifer's rebellion on Jerusalem and the various misled planets have long since heartily repented of their folly, and we truly believe that all such sincere penitents will in some manner be rehabilitated and restored to some phase of universe surface when the Ancients of Days finally complete the adjudication of the affairs of Satanian rebellion, which they have so recently begun. So it's the belief of the writer of this paper that those who were just misled and found and caught up in this rebellion, who did not entirely plan on rebelling against God, would probably be rehabilitated and given another chance at something in the universe, right? But those who did not, that stuck with the rebellion, those are the ones who will be wiped out, right? That's the belief that, anyway. But that's totally up to the Ancients of Days. The Ancients of Days could come back and say every being that participated in the rebellion is gone. You know, that's up to the Ancients of Days and their wisdom. So we'll see how it works out.
Because if they were truly weak-minded individuals, they might do it again if they weren't
That's right.
increasing their knowledge and abilities.
Yeah. 5. The immediate results of rebellion. Great confusion reigned in Dalmatia, and thereabout for almost 50 years after this instigation of rebellion. The complete and radical reorganization of the whole world was attempted. Revolution displaced evolution as the policy of cultural advancement and racial improvement. Among the superior and partially trained sojourners in and near Dalmatia, there appeared a sudden advancement in cultural status. But when these new and radical methods of attempting on the outlying peoples and indescribable confusion and racial pandemonium was the immediate result. Liberty was quickly translated into license by the half-evolved primitive man of those days. Because they felt like there was no rule and no law, they had license to do whatever they wanted.
Hey,
Right?
Roger, when they mention the trained sojourners in Dalmatia, or
Yeah.
near, they're talking about the people of the earth, right? What they've
Yeah,
learned from those.
The people of the earth, that's right. Those who were being trained in Dalmatia and those who lived outside of Dalmatia had partial information. So when they followed this basic liberty with no control of themselves, then of course they became quickly back to their barbaric ways, killing each other and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Very soon after the rebellion, the entire staff of sedition were engaged in energetic defense of the city against the hordes of semi-savages who besieged its walls as a result of the doctrines of liberty which had been prematurely taught them. And years before the beautiful headquarters went down beneath the southern waves, the misled and mistaught tribes of Dalmatia hinterland had already swept down in semi-savage assault on the splendid city, driving secession staffs and their associates northward.
Because of the influx of all the barbarians coming over the walls and everything, they took over the city. So those that rebelled had to leave Dalmatia, and that's how they ended up north with Nod. You follow me? They couldn't stay in the city because they were constantly being attacked by these savages, right? And that was because of the rebellion.
And they didn't have the tree of life.
They
were
didn't have
on
the tree of
survey.
life. That's right. Tim.
The Caligastia scheme for the immediate reconstruction of human society in accordance with his ideals of individual freedom and group liberties proved a swift and more or less complete failure. Society quickly sank back to its old biologic level, and the forward struggle began all over, starting not very far in advance of where it was at the beginning of the Caligastia regime. This upheaval having left the world in confusion, worse confounded.
So all the things they had taught them had been set aside, right?
Hey Roger, when they say the word liberties, that means freedom, right?
Freedom, yeah. And basically what they're talking about is freedom to do whatever you want without resolve to anybody else. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
And we know that's not the way of the world, right? All right. Rodney.
162 years after the rebellion, a tidal wave swept up over Dalmatia, and the planetary headquarters sank beneath the waters of the sea. And this land did not again emerge until almost every vestige of the noble culture of those splendid ages had been obliterated.
So the tidal wave basically wiped out the entire city of Dalmatia. And by the time it sank, the waters subsided, and it came back up, there was nothing left. Right?
Hey Roger, that's not in reference to Noah, right? That was much
No.
later.
No, that's not. And we will study what Noah really is later on, but
Exactly.
it's basically there was a Noah, but the whole story of the fable of the world being covered by water, it was covered in water, but not because,
It was a flood, yeah.
not because of Noah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Actually, it was covered in water 3 times before human beings started populating it. Okay, dear, did you take it?
When the first capital of the world was engulfed, it harbored only the lowest types of Sangha races of Urantia, renegades who had already converted the Father's temple into a shrine dedicated to Nod, the false god of light and fire.
So they took the Father's shrine and made it into something totally wrong. Right?
Roger, I think you need to adjust your camera.
I'm sorry, one of our kittens was playing with it.
I figured.
I tried to hold it up here, but
Can you put it back?
yes.
And Nog was the individual, another teacher, right, from the Caligastia?
No, that was somebody totally different. That was one of the barbarians.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Van the Steadfast. The followers of Van early withdrew to the highlands west of India, where they were exempt from attacks by the confused races of the lowlands and from the place of retirement. They planned for the rehabilitation of the world, and their early Badonite predecessors had once all unwittingly worked for the welfare of mankind just before the days of the birth of the Sangeet tribes. So they ended up in India, Van and his group.
So I've got a question.
Yeah.
Back 100 years ago, when this was put together, did Tibet exist? Because I think that's northwest India. The
Yeah.
highlands of Tibet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It did. At least 100 years ago it did. Millie, I think you're next.
Before the arrival of the Melchizedek receivers, Van placed the administration of human affairs in the hands of 10 committees of 4 groups each, identical with those of the Prince's regime. The senior resident life carriers assumed temporary leadership of this Council of 40, which functioned throughout the 7 years of waiting. Similar groups of Amadonites were assumed these responsibilities when the 39 loyal staff members returned to Jerusalem.
So when the staff members of the Caligastia returned to Jerusalem, then the Amadonites assumed their responsibilities, right? And it remained that way until Adam and Eve. Okay. Tim.
These Anamites were derived from the group of 144 loyal Anadites, to which Amadon belonged, and who have become known by his name. This group comprised 39 men and 105 women. 56 of this number were of immortality status, and all except Amadon were translated along with the loyal members of the staff. The remainder of this noble band continued on earth to the end of their mortal days under the leadership of Van and Amadon. I lost my place. I was reading off your screen, but it went blur because I lost my place.
They were biological.
They were.
Your screen is trying to 56, okay. Were translated, okay. The remainder of this noble band continued on earth to the end of their immortal days under the leadership of Van and Amadon. They were the biologic leaven which multiplied and continued to furnish leadership for the world down through the long dark ages of the post-Rebellion era.
Okay, so they took over and basically ran things down until Adam and Eve showed up, right? Rodney.
Man was left on the ranch until the time of Adam, remaining the titular head of all superhuman personalities functioning on the planet. He and Anton were sustained by the technique of the Tree of Life in conjunction with the specialized life ministry of the Melchizedeks for over 150,000 years.
So there you have an example of a human Amadon who lived 150,000 years.
I'm sure myths came from that.
That's pretty interesting. Okay, here. No, you can't sit on the keyboard, sweetie. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The affairs of Urantia were for a long time administered by a council of planetary receivers, 12 Melchizedeks, confirmed by the mandate of the senior constellation ruler, the Most High Father of Melchizedek. Associated with the Melchizedek receivers was an advisory council consisting of one of the loyal aides of the fallen prince, the 2 resident life carriers, a Trinitized son in apprenticeship training, a volunteer teacher's son, a brilliant evening star of Avalon, periodically, the chiefs of seraphims, the chiefs of seraphim and cherubim, advisors from 2 neighboring planets, the Director General of Subordinate Angelic Life, and Van, the Commander-in-Chief of the Midway Creatures. And Van. And thus was Urantia governed and administered until the arrival of Adam. It is not strange that the courageous and loyal Van was assigned a place on the Council of Planetary Receivers, which for so long administered the affairs of Urantia.
And that's basically how it happened, right? So we had a evening star of Avalon, which is our closest planetary neighbor, right? And these other beings that were here to help us along until Adam and Eve arrived. So somebody is always out here watching us, take care of us. Right, the 12 Melchizedek receivers of Urantia did heroic work. They preserved the remnants of civilization, and their planetary policies were faithfully executed by man. Within 1,000 years after the rebellion, he had more than 350 advanced groups scattered abroad in the world. These outposts of civilization consisted largely of the descendants of the loyal Andonites, slightly mixed with the Semitic races, particularly the blue men and the Nodites. Okay, so these were the Nodites were the descendants of Nod, right? Something good came out of that.
Notwithstanding the terrible setback of a rebellion, there were many good strains of biologic promise on Earth. Under the supervision of the Melchizedek receivers, Van and Amadon continued the work of fostering the natural evolution of the human race, carrying forward the physical evolution of man until it reached that culminating attainment which warranted the dispatch of a material son and daughter.
So they did everything they could to mix the race, with the groups and the tribes and things like that to improve the race up to the point it could not be improved any longer, and that was when they needed to call for a material son and daughter to finish out, right? Tim, take the next one.
Van and Amadon remained on Earth until shortly after the arrival of Adam and Eve. Some years thereafter, they were translated to Jerusalem, where Van was reunited with his waiting adjuster. Van now serves on behalf of Urantia while awaiting the order to go forward on the long trial to paradise perfection and the unrevealed destiny of the assembly corps of the mortal finality.
Okay. So Van is going on his journey, right?
So Roger, Van did not experience death. He was translated.
He was translated, that's right. Yeah.
And
And
His
Amadon along with him.
pardon me?
Amadon did the same thing. He went from
Yeah. Now their bodies weren't translated. Their bodies weren't, right?
That's right. Yeah. Now, remember, when you're translated from this existence to the next, Rodney, your body is consumed in fire.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so their bodies basically would burn up and disappear. Right.
Right. Okay. It should be reported that when Van appealed to the Most Highs of Agentia, after Lucifer had sustained Caligastia and Urantia, the constellation fathers dispatched an immediate decision sustaining Van on every point of his contention. This verdict failed to reach him because the planetary circuits of communication were severed while it was in transit. Only recently was this actual ruling discovered lodged in the possession of a relay energy transmitter, where it had been marooned ever since the isolation of Urantia. Without this discovery, made as a result of the investigations of the Urantia midwayers, The release of this decision would have awaited the restoration of Rancha to the constellation circuits. And this apparent accident of interplanetary communication was possible because energy transmitters can receive and transmit intelligence, but they cannot initiate communication.
Okay, so these energy transmitters, when the circuits was cut, it just got lodged there, it stopped. And it would not go forward until the circuits were restored, and at that point it would go on, right? But they couldn't, the energy transmitters cannot initiate communication. So they couldn't have sent it out even if they wanted to, right?
Had to be retrieved.
It had to be retrieved, that's right. And it was discovered by one of the midwayers, right? Guess he was investigating what got lodged in the transmitters while they were.
That had to go somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
The technical status of Anne on the legal records of Satania was not actually and finally settled until this ruling of the Adentia Fathers was recorded on Jerusalem.
Yeah. So he did not know his fate until that particular time. Remote repercussions of sin. The personal, centripetal consequences of a creature's willful and persistent rejection of life are both inevitable and individual, and are of concern only to deity and to the personal creature. Such a soul-destroying harvest of iniquity is the inner reaping of the iniquitous will creature. What are they telling us here? So, when you're iniquitous and you reject what's right, you reject what's life, it was only a repercussion to yourself and deity, no other person. So each one of us are responsible for our own sin and iniquitous nature. So we got to watch what we do. Millie.
Got it. But not so with the external repercussions of sin. The impersonal, centrifugal consequences of embraced sin are both inevitable and collective, being of concern to every creature functioning within the effect range of such events.
So whenever we sin or are iniquitous, it affects everyone around us that we come in contact with.
It's like a virus, right?
Like a virus, right? Okay. All right. Ken.
By 50,000 years after the collapse of the planetary administration, earthly affairs were so disorganized and retarded that the human race had gained very little over the general evolutionary status existing at the time of Caligastia's arrival, 350,000 years previously. In certain respects, progress had been made. In other directions, much ground had been lost.
So 300,000 years of progress had been wiped out within 50,000 years. Rodney.
Sin is never pure local in its effects. The administrative sectors of the universes are organismal. The plight of one personality must, to a certain extent, be shared by all. Sin, being an attitude of the person toward reality, is destined to exhibit its inherent negativistic harvest upon any and all related levels of universe values. But the full consequences of erroneous thinking, evil doing, or simple planning are experienced only on the level of actual performance. The transgression of universe law may be fatal in the physical realm without seriously involving the mind or impairing the spiritual experience. Sin is fraught with the fatal consequences to personality survival only when it is the attitude of the whole being, when it stands for the choosing of the mind and the willing of the soul.
So, think about this. When Jesus says we have to love one another as we love ourselves, this is part of this. Because when we do not love one another and we're sinful, iniquitous, want to harm each other, its consequences goes out in circles. It basically just goes out in waves, right? So by loving one another and caring for each other and helping each other along and helping each other progress, then we stop the consequences of that sin repercussion. You see what I'm saying? So you can see the importance of what Jesus taught us. Sweet.
Evil and sin visit their consequences in material and social realms and may sometimes even retard spiritual progress on certain levels of universe reality. But never does the sin of any being rob another of the realization of the divine right of personality survival. Eternal survival can be jeopardized only by the decisions of the mind and the choice of the soul of the individual himself.
So no matter what happens to you, it cannot affect your right to eternal survival. Okay? Anything anybody does to you. Right. Sin on your end did very little to delay that biologic evolution, but it did operate to deprive the mortal races of the full benefit of the Adamic inheritance. Sin enormously retards intellectual development, moral growth, social progress, and mass spiritual attainment. But it does not prevent the highest spiritual achievement by any individual who chooses to know God and sincerely to do His will. So even though Adam and Eve failed in their responsibility of giving us the violent race in the way God intended it, it still does not retard our ability to choose and know God and to do the will of God. Okay? It just slowed down our biologic evolution is all it did. All right? Calagassa rebelled. Adam and Eve did default, but no mortals consequently born on Urantia has suffered in his personal spiritual experience because of these blunders. Every mortal born on Urantia since Calagassa's rebellion has been in some manner time penalized, but the future welfare of such mortals has never been in the least eternity jeopardized. No person is ever made to suffer vital spiritual deprivation because of the sin of another. Sin is wholly personal and to moral guilt or spiritual consequences, notwithstanding its far-flung repercussions in administrative, intellectual, and social domains. So no matter what happens, even though we live on a planet where Calagassa rebelled and Adam and Eve failed, it still does not jeopardize our eternal progress to paradise. Okay? It actually does not keep us from making those decisions that makes us men and women of God.
While we cannot fathom the wisdom that permits such catastrophes, we can always discern the beneficial outworking of these local disturbances as they are reflected out upon the universe at large.
Okay, Tim, would you take the next one?
Section 8, the human hero of the rebellion. The Lucifer rebellion was withstood by many courageous beings on the various worlds of Satania, but the records of Salvington portray Amadon and the outstanding character of the entire system and his glorious rejection of the flood tides of sedation, and in his unswerving devotion to Van. They stood together, unmoved in their loyalty to supremacy of the invisible Father and his Son Michael.
So he was the hero, the human hero of the rebellion. Rodney.
At the time of these momentous transactions, I was stationed on Utentia, and I am still conscious of the exhilaration I experienced as I perused. What's that word?
Perused, like looked over.
Okay, as I experienced and perused the Salvington broadcast, which told from day to day of the unbelievable steadfastness, the transcendent devotion, and the exquisite loyalty of this one-time semi-savage springing from the experiential and original stock of the Andonic race.
So he's on Adentia looking at the broadcast, and it's telling them what's happening on Urantia, you know, which is kind of interesting. So does that still happen now? Probably so. You know, there's somebody watching us all the time, right?
Oh, really?
From Adentia up through Salvington and even on to Uversa, for 7 long years, the first inquiry of all subordinate celestial life regarding the Satania rebellion ever and always was, what of Amadon of Urantia does he still stand unmoved?
So everybody in the universe, the local system, wanted to know how this mortal from Urantia was doing, still doing. If the Lucifer rebellion has handicapped the local system and its fallen worlds, if the loss of this son and his misled associates has temporarily hampered the progress of the constellation in Relatiobec, then weigh the effect of the far-flung presentation of the inspiring performance of this one child of nature and his determined band of 143 comrades in standing steadfast for the higher concepts of the universe management and administration in the face of such tremendous and adverse pressure exerted by his loyal superiors. Disloyal superiors. Well, that's a long sentence. And let me assure you, this has already done more good in the universe of Nebadon and the universe of Arvanton,
Super
universe of Arvanton, than can ever be outweighed by the sum total of all the evil and sorrow of the Lucifer rebellion. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
And all this is a beautifully touching and superbly magnificent illumination of the wisdom of the Father's universal plan for mobilizing the core of mortal finality unparadised and for rescuing this vast group of mysterious servants.
Recruiting.
Say again?
Recruiting.
Not rescuing, recruiting.
Recruiting this vast group of mysterious servants of the future, largely from the common clay of the mortals of ascending progression, just such mortals as the impardonable Amadon, presented by Melchizedek of Nebadon.
All right. Next time we go on to paper 68, the dawn of civilization.
I had a great time with everybody and everybody out there listening.
I did too. Let's say a little prayer and we'll close for the night. Billy, would you like to close us tonight?
Certainly. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together and for these words from your newest revelation. We ask that you help us to understand them. It means so much to know where it came from and how it came to us. We thank you for all your guidance. We thank you for our thought adjusters. We thank you for our guardian angels. We thank you for your son, Michael of Nebadon, who we know is Jesus. In his name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again.